I immigrate to the United States when I'm 5 years old.
Okay.
So first generation immigrant, and we come to this country with nothing. Fast forward to today, and in one generation, my parents went from having nothing to now they have a farm in the Bay Area with horses, chickens, and goats. They have a house in Mountain View that they bought. They're like living this incredible life. My oldest sister went to Stanford. My second sister got a full ride to William & Mary and got her doctorate in neuroscience. My little brother got his master's at Berkeley and works at OpenAI now. And I was an enlisted Marine, an exited startup founder, and now VC. And I say these things not at all to brag. I say that because only in this country is that possible.
Right.
We live in the greatest country in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Where else is that possible to have that kind of story?
Welcome to the In the Field podcast, where we speak to veterans, service members, and those in the transition process to learn about their stories. Mike, thanks so much for being on.
Appreciate you, Holden.
I know that the microphone is a bit of a finagly thing. You got to just be able to shift it around. Thanks so much for being on the show. Before we get started, when was the last time you had an MRE?
It's 2024. Got out of the Marines in 2008, and I have not touched an MRE since then. So we're going on between 16 and 17 years.
Wow. All right.
That's a long time. Have they changed?
I was going to say, there's a strong probability the ones that you had while you were in are not going to be here. But guest goes first. You let me know. Which one would you like to try? You said 16 years.
16 years. Yeah, the front of them already look different from how I remember them. But let's see. What are our options here?
We've got tons of options. Yeah, feel free to move the mic completely out of the way. It pivots. The Patty. I mean, if you pick the Patty, that is a very dangerous game to play because I'll let you know that they have not improved.
I'm going to skip that one. Man, do I have to pick one of these? I'm going to go...
You can go pizza.
You know what? I'm going to go... The other ones all look a little bit dangerous. This looks like the safest option to me because I'm not going to lie. My experience with MREs, you generally don't feel amazing after you have them. No. You just got used to feeling terrible. So I guess this will make me feel the least terrible.
You are going to a dinner, I think, after this too.
I do have
so the last thing I want to do is upset your stomach. Fair warning, because I'd feel bad if I didn't warn you. It's not that good. Okay. Not to spoil anything, but
just
it's
this
fine
one specifically, or all of them.
It's not going to make you feel sick. Just not the best. But you do you. I don't want to sway you one way or the other.
Well, I'm switching it up. We're going game time decision Italian sausage.
Okay, that one. I won't say anything. Let's.
This feels like a lose-lose situation all around. I'm looking at tuna, and I'm definitely not doing tuna out of a brown bag.
It's
that's been sitting there for God knows how long.
But
these things are supposed to. How long are they supposed to last?
I've always heard 10 years. I don't know if that's just a myth, but I do know that they're supposed to last for quite a while.
All right, now that I've already committed to it, tell me what you were going to say about this one. It's the worst one.
We'll keep it as a surprise.
Dude, this is great. I completely take back anything I said about MREs being terrible. Look at this.
Oh, man. Okay, you were able to open yours. Come on, I can't be showing up here. Okay, there we go. So as we open these up, I would love to go way back. So Mike in high school, what's going through your mind? And was the military even an option for you during that time? Or were you thinking of it as an option?
Well, I think it's important to kind of set the stage because the kind of life before high school is also an important part of the story. And that is, I immigrate to the United States when I'm 5 years old.
Okay.
So first generation immigrant. And we come to this country with nothing.
From where?
From Russia. Born in Moscow. Moved to the States when I'm 5 years old. And I just remember not having anything. I mean, if there's even less than nothing, it feels like that's kind of what we had, right? Yeah. I had two older sisters, younger brother, and we moved to Berkeley, California.
Okay.
Or like El Cerrito, really, just outside of Berkeley. And I remember, I don't have a lot of memories of childhood at that moment. And you'll see how this plays into like the larger story. But I do remember like my dad was able to like borrow, $500 and get this like red Hyundai hatchback.
Oh my God.
And I remember this car because it was so terrible. It barely ran. And when my dad would pick us up from school, we lived on this hill. I remember on Cutting Drive. I just remember like the name of the street. But when he would pick us up from school, he would stop at the bottom of the hill, and my sisters and I would have to get out of the car and walk up the hill to our house because the car wouldn't make it with all of us in it. Like it was that bad.
Right.
And the reason I say that that's an important part of my story, and again, I'll go to the high school piece in a moment, but like fast forward to today, and in one generation, so my parents went from, having nothing to now they have a farm in the Bay Area with horses, chickens, and goats. They, they have a house in Mountain View that they bought. They now have this incredible farm. They're like living this incredible life. My oldest sister went to Stanford. My second sister got a full ride to William & Mary and got her doctorate in neuroscience. My little brother got his master's at Berkeley and works at OpenAI now. And I'm, I was an enlisted Marine, an exited startup founder, and now VC.
Yep.
And I say these things not at all to brag or say like, hey, look at how cool my family is. I say that because only in this country is that possible.
Right.
And so now tie into your question in high school, like, I don't know if I realized this at the time, but I certainly realize it now looking back. And I'll talk about like why I made the decision to enlist in the Marines. But we live in the greatest country in the world. Where else is that possible to have that kind of story?
Yeah.
And I hear that story, time and time again.
It's so funny. I mean, not funny, but I was just reading about this the other day where, when you look at England, right? Because I think the sometimes when we talk about the American dream or mobility within America, people go like, well, there's Canada and England and all this other stuff. But there was this really great thread I was reading where wealth mobility is possible in other countries, obviously, right? But when you look at England or the UK, you can go up in wealth, but you can't ever go up in class. So class is a very rigid structure in England. And so, yeah, you might be able to get wealthier, quote unquote. But the idea that somebody like you immigrating from Russia, coming from a quote unquote low class family, could get into banking or, investment banking.
Right.
That is such a gate kept thing within many other countries where it doesn't really seem to be the case here. Like, obviously, there are still barriers to entry, but the idea of you can't go into this industry or field because you're not in the right, social class, it's just unheard of, I think, in America.
100%. I mean, and in terms of what's available to us from kind of an education standpoint, this is why I'm such a big fan of what you're doing with the podcast. Yeah. Like, so much of what I learned was, from podcasts, from books, like what has historically been, this very gated industry, especially venture capital, very kind of black box. No one, you kind of hear about it, some of them are doing well, but you don't really know like how to even get into it. How does it work? And now you have great podcasts, you have incredible books, you have so many resources, you have people willing to talk about it. And I'm just a huge fan of like the send the elevator back down model, right? I think it's so important that we do that. Cause again, I look back at the last 20 years and, from graduating high school to now and just how much has changed for myself, for my family. And this is why we'll talk about, the firm, but this is why we choose to invest in the types of companies we invest in and the types of founders we invest in. And because I believe in this country and I believe in liberty and I believe in freedom. And I'm just like, I'm so grateful. I want to commit all my time, energy, and capital to advancing this country.
And so, I mean, let's take a step back from high school. What was that transition like? So I moved from Sweden when I was either, 5 or 6. I remember getting put in ESL classes. The nice thing is sometimes when you're that young, you do kind of block out some of those memories and it's just a few core pieces and you do have enough time to either assimilate or adjust into the culture. But do you remember that far back what was going through your mind or the adjustment period going from Russia to America?
Yeah, I remember parts of it. I feel like most of my childhood, for one reason or another, not quite sure, just don't remember much of it. But I remember like wanting to assimilate kind of as quickly as possible. And this is still why, like I can understand Russian. And I actually ask my parents to speak to me as often as they can. So I can just kind of keep that part of my brain active, but I can't speak it at all. And that's because, you know, growing up, I didn't want to have the accent. I don't think every kid is just trying their best to like blend in and not be different in any way.
Standing out. I mean, maybe it's changed nowadays, but
I think it's the same because I haven't.
Most people want to, not be the highlighter, you know, the one
it's funny. You have to be like perfectly average because if you're like too smart, then you're like a nerd. If you're too dumb, you know, you're an idiot. If you're too tall, you're a nickname for this. If you're too short, this. If you have, you know, an accent, you're this. So I think that's just whatever. I think it's just childhood. Society. And that's how it is. And so, you know, it's funny to bring it up though, because now I feel like very much the opposite as an adult, where I actually love all of the things that make me different. Like I'm a very proud nerd. I'm happy to, you know, be asleep at 9, 10 o'clock every night and wake up early. I'm happy to like not drink, kind of go against societal norms. Or even, you know, again, being enlisted Marine, that's in venture capital now, like that, as you mentioned, it's very uncommon, but I love at this point in my life kind of going against the grain. Whereas I think a big part of my childhood was trying to fit in.
Do you think that occurred just from maturity, or was there a turning point in your life that kind of made that click for you in the sense of, I do want to stand out and I want to make a name for myself outside of the norm, right? The bubble. Yeah.
Well, interestingly, and this goes back to the very first question, so it's a perfect segue. Like the Marines was really that turning point. There have been a number of decisions since then that we can kind of, you know, double click on, but the Marines, I would say, was the first time, because I went to a school called Los Altos High School. You know, we were living in Mountain View, and in Los Altos High School, like no one goes to the military. In my graduating class, it was myself, a friend of mine, Will Sigwa, that was unfortunately killed in action. Another friend of mine, Jeremy Taylor, that ended up going in the Marines. So it was myself and like 2, maybe 3 others in the entire class. Cause you just, you know,
there was a news article written about me cause I was one of 2 people that enlisted.
It's just not, it's, you just don't do it, right? Everyone, because it's a good school. My parents were very intentional about where we lived and why we went to school there. But the path was like my sisters did. It was like, you get good grades in high school, you go to a great college, you get a great career, and that's just what you do. And I remember, you know, a friend of mine, Jeremy, was the one that told me this. Have you ever talked to a Marine recruiter? And I just, like, it was not even on my radar, to answer your question. Didn't even think about it at all. And I remember going to the recruiter's office and like seeing, I had not talked to any of the other branches, to be honest. Never shared. I didn't know the Marines was even a separate branch of the military. Like I just knew, like, I think Army, Navy, maybe Air Force, like had no idea. But when I went to the recruiter's office, there's this big badass Marine standing there at the front. He's like, you want to be badass? I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And I don't know if you remember this or if they did this to you, but they pulled out the little placards with the words written on them. Did they do this with you? They were almost like name tags, and it has like camaraderie, leadership, you know, adventure, independence, like freedom, liberty, like all of these things. And they kind of said, rank these and challenge. They said, rank these in order of priority to you. What's most important? And I remember looking at all these things, the words I just mentioned, and I realized I can't even rank them because all of them are so important to me. The challenge, the, you know, patriotism, the camaraderie, the brotherhood, all of that. And it was really like when I sat in front of the recruiter and I saw all of this, it was this combination of, I want to go serve my country. I want to go do the thing that's most challenging. I want to challenge myself to see what I'm made of. And, you know, to answer your question, like I wanted to go against the grain. I wanted to do something that was completely on me. It was like where I would kind of realize what I was made of through this process.
So many questions before we jump into it. We got to go into the actual.
Are you sure you don't have any other questions?
No, exactly. You know, we notice when our guests are trying to get out of actually eating some good old MRE. So I've got barbecue sauce. I got the.
All right. So look, I'm this far in. You tell me what you were going to say about this Italian sausage with peppers and onions and marinara sauce.
It's not bad. I personally liked it. I'll put it that way. I've got gratin.
Hold it. It's bad to lie on a podcast. just kidding.
We fact checked everything and we have it running.
Dude, trail mix recovery with beef jerky, not bad.
Ooh,
not
that
bad
actually
at all.
might
Have you
be
ever
the
seen
first time I've seen that.
Okay,
one.
I will certainly take a bite of that. What's the protocol here?
Well, so the second question for the MRE is, do you want to go heated or unheated?
Unheated, come on.
Okay, we can go unheated.
Make it simple. It's here.
Of course, the Marine wants to go unheated.
Crackers. I remember these guys. All right, let's bring back some memories
cheese
now.
Spread and bacon.
Did you ever make sriracha bombs?
No. See, this is why I love having guests on, because there's always some sort of either recipe or thing people did with MREs that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah, well, a few things. I remember your last guest did that like chocolate pudding, which was awesome. I never did that. I don't even know if we had the option to do that. But the like fun things I remember is, we would, pour water in these things. You put some sriracha in there and then you like just tie them up so they blow up. But it would be like a little sriracha bomb, like a stink bomb.
Got it. I've done the MRE, like put it in a water bottle or something. Didn't do the adding of the sriracha or hot sauce.
Yeah.
So
do they still do?
Can we do that in the studio? I'm kidding.
Yeah. Look, but they don't. Apparently, we did it too much. Look, no sriracha in here. Do you remember when they would give us the little sriracha bottles?
Yeah. So some of them have it.
Okay,
some of them still have it. Not all of them do though. They've also gone back and forth. Some of them have like dried chili flakes instead of like a liquid bottle.
I would be all about the dried chili flakes. Okay. So
if you're a fan of M&Ms, we got some peanut M&Ms.
I'm good on those for right now. I am going to actually, this may be changing my mind. We'll see. I'm going to start with beef jerky.
Okay.
And then Italian sausage with peppers. We'll try it out. What are you having right now?
I have some of the M&Ms.
All right.
Fantastic. I'm prepping the tortillas, and we got the oatmeal cookies. I'm going to break open this.
All right, let's try this out.
Is it just beef jerky, or it's trail mix and beef jerky?
Dude, this is great. I completely take back anything I said about MREs being terrible.
The trepidation has gone away.
Look at this.
We'll love
that
to try
is so good. I wish that existed when I was in the Marines.
It's
trail mix with beef jerky, and the beef jerky tastes great.
I have not had this one yet, so
right. I'll actually finish this. Right?
That was like real beef jerky.
Beef jerky.
Wow.
All right. First time you had it?
Yeah. I think there's cranberries in there too.
Yeah.
Oh, Jimmy, really good.
If they just sold this in a store, I would go buy it. And makes me question, why haven't I done this before?
Right? Oh, wait, sorry. I'm confused now. Why you haven't had an MRE before, or
why I haven't combined beef jerky with like cranberries and nuts? That's a great little snack.
That's a great recipe that I will.
When you go hiking, you got your beef jerky, you've got your trail mix, put them together.
There's the one problem with trail mix. I feel like there's never enough like protein in it.
Never enough
it's
protein.
Just, like, too much, peanuts or whatever. But
we're onto something here. All right. If anyone is watching this and takes this idea, what should we call it? Trail jerky?
Trail jerky? Beef trail? No, that sounds horrible. Cut that. Oh man, yeah. Right. I think trail jerky is the winner on that. That is legitimately very very good.
I'm very happy with this.
Whoever's at the MRE office, props to you.
Well done.
So you bucked the trend. What were your parents thinking when you decided you wanted to enlist in the Marines? Were they nervous? Were they supportive? Especially if you had older siblings deciding to go to, the more traditional route. Yeah.
Well, first I joined in June 2003. So I graduated high school end of May 2003, and I was off to boot camp just 2 or 3 weeks later. And this, obviously, it's post 9/11. I remember the day. I think we all remember exactly where we were. I remember getting in. My mom was driving me to school. I get in the car, and like I don't remember exactly what she said, but it was just that like eerie like silence in the car. Mm-hmm. And of course, like get to school, and all the teachers just have it on TV, and you're just sitting there like in total silence and shock. And again, I look back on it now, and I don't know if at the time that I was joining the Marines, like I would certainly say patriotism was a big part of it. I want to go fight for our country. But it I think 9/11 had a much bigger impact on me than I think I would have even admitted at the time.
Yeah.
And so again, all of these factors come together, this kind of convergence of like life events and interests and passions and wanting to challenge myself and all this. And, at the time I didn't have a great relationship with my parents. I am absolutely I love my parents so much, and we're so close now. It's interesting. I think it just naturally, as a function
when
of
you're
age,
a teenager, it's it's tough.
Yeah. And, that's how my experience was. And, there was, a big part of it too was, I wanted to, again, I mentioned prove it to myself, but also like be completely separate from them. Right.
Yeah.
Because I think I knew that if I went to college, even if I kind of did it on my own and took out loans, I would still kind of be tied to them in some way. That would be like that safety net that was always there of like, yeah, parents are going to help me out in some way.
Yep.
But this was my way of just saying, no, like I'm officially out on my own and I'm going to, again, kind of see what I'm made of. Yeah. And so it came really as a shock, I think, to my parents initially. It came as a shock to friends of mine, because I was doing the whole, again, I joined so late.
Yeah.
I think I went to the recruiter's office maybe a month and a half before, graduation.
Oh, wow.
Or 2 months, something like very, very short time window, because I had already gotten into different colleges. I was already planning on going.
So you'd done all the
I had
prep.
done all the things. I had done all, because the applications you have to do way before that.
Yeah.
So I had friends that were going. So it was like, no, I'm going to college. Here's the path. Here's what I'm doing. And then boom, hard pivot, like took everyone, like kind of shocked everyone.
Yeah.
And I just remember, 3.5 months later, that moment of I graduated boot camp as a squad leader. And I remember kind of looking out of the corner of my eye and seeing my family, my parents in the stands at graduation. And I'm like, trying to keep it together. But man, probably the most emotional / like the most proud I've ever felt in my life is like seeing how proud they were of me.
Yeah.
And this is me at, 18 years old and barely having done anything yet. I had just graduated boot camp.
No, likewise for me. I went from, I wasn't a good, so I never applied to colleges. I was about to fail out. And so when I graduated basic training, that was the biggest accomplishment of my life. And I think for most 18-year-olds graduating basic training from any branch, like how much can you actually do, leading up to 18? And that is like a big accomplishment. And as sappy and as silly as it kind of sounds, because, you end up doing other bigger and cooler things down the line. Like it is a big moment for a lot of people. And I think the military also does do a good job at making it feel very grandiose and all that. So graduating Marines, before you went in though, did you know what MOS you wanted to go? I know that Marines are a little bit different. You pick your branch or the field that you want to go into, so you don't really know what your MOS is. What was your thought process?
Yeah, I'm 18 years old and I feel invincible, and so I want to go. I want to go to combat.
Yep.
And of course, like looking back at my time in the Marines, very grateful for kind of how everything worked out. And I remember, I take the ASVAB, I score very high on the ASVAB, and they tell me, not a lot of people get this. And so we're putting you into the avionics field. Okay. So I went in as a 5954, which is a ComTech.
Okay.
And I remember just saying, no, I want to be infantry. I want to be infantry. And they're like, no, you're you're
too smart.
Yeah, kind of like we need you to do this. And so I went to, they said it was the longest school in the Marines. I don't know if that's still the case.
So check it.
Yeah, fact check. It was in Pensacola, Florida. So I mean, it was over a year long. So that's why I was in for 5 years instead of my standard 4-year contract on active and then 3 inactive, right? But my A school, if I remember, A school and C school, if that means anything to anyone, it's like we did, nerdy component level repair on air traffic control equipment, which interestingly, like when I was stationed at Camp Pendleton, which was my last duty station, I was in Kaneohe Bay, Hawaii for a year. Then I came to Camp Pendleton in San Diego, and I remember thinking like I didn't join the Marines to like sit in an air conditioned building and like work on radios like this. And I had some like fun experiences and all that, but I ended up teaching MCMAP. So I went through the MAI, the martial arts instructor course. MCMAP is the Marine Corps martial arts program, and it's their version of hand-to-hand combat. And I remember like falling in love with it and ended up getting my instructor certification. So that's kind of what I did for the last 3 years I was in, is teach the Marines version of hand-to-hand combat as a black belt instructor.
Did you feel like the Marines lived up to your expectation? And I mean, that's a very vague question to ask, but another way to ask it is the naivete of an 18-year-old, right? Going in, you have a lot of ideas of what the military is. What things kind of aligned and what things were you completely wrong about?
Yeah, I love that question. I think, I don't want to speak for everyone. I just remember when I learned about the Marines, again, kind of senior year of high school, I like fell in love with them. And I remember having like the scout sniper poster, you know, Marine, then you've got this badass guy
fighting the dragon, pulling out the sword
and fighting. I do remember that commercial. Yeah. This one I had was just like a force recon or scout sniper.
Got it.
And I'm like, man, that's what I want to do, you know? And the high level, to answer the question, is like, I am so grateful for the Marines and my time in. You know, I ended up getting meritorious promotions. I ended up learning so much about myself. I think I developed so much of like who I am and my leadership skills through my time in the Marines. So I think there are incredible positives that I've pulled out of it. Yeah. And in many ways, it fell short of, I think, expectations that I had. And there were certainly times, there's a reason I got out of the military too. I again, did very well, and they tried to throw everything at me to stay in, you know, like, cause I
mean, you're in Hawaii, you're getting some pretty nice duty stations.
Yeah. And I picked up Sergeant E5 in 3 years, which you're like, you know, that was fast. And so you know, I had a lot of responsibility, but I also had a lot more freedom. Yeah. But I remember them saying, you know, hey, I re-enlist and you're picking up staff sergeant. And like, so I would have been staff sergeant in 5, which is kind of unheard of. I really wanted to go to jump school because everyone wants those wings, those flashy little wings. Like, so there were all of these incentives they were trying to throw at me. But ultimately, I also knew that the military was limiting in what I could do. There were so many times where I would want to create more efficient systems, and I propose new ways of doing things. Because I'm like, wait, we're in charge of this budget, and there's this way to be so much more efficient here, or here's how this training could be so much better here. Like, this entrepreneur in me wanted to innovate within the organization of the military, and that's not how it operates. Like, if you're a sergeant, you're gonna have, you know, a staff NCO, you're gonna have someone, a chief warrant officer, someone's gonna like shut it down along the way. And so I just remember thinking, like, I can't be in an environment, rather, like, I'm going to put myself in an environment where it is like like full meritocracy, and it's all like performance-based outcomes where you're rewarded based on like how well you innovate and how well you create and how efficiently you can make things.
I mean, it's so funny because we have a lot of officers on the show, and nothing against them, right? But I do think the way that officers are graded in their performance is fundamentally very different than enlisted. For many good reasons. And so when I hear a lot of officers go, well, I got to implement this or do this, and be a little bit of that shaker and mover, sometimes it's based on the branch or the field or whatever they're doing. Yeah. But I think a lot of it is also just the way that they're rated is how did you, increase performance, or how are you able to do this? Where when you're in the NCO ranks or just in the enlisted ranks, so much of it is just how well are you at executing upon the task? And if you're the one that's trying to be the shaker and mover, it's kind of like, get back in line. Don't shake the boat too much.
That's exactly it. Yeah. And look, I, of course, like as a private in PFC and Lance Corporal, like I understood that, and I'm totally fine. I think that's like the beauty of the enlisted ranks is like, you know, you're scrubbing toilets when you first start, and you're doing all the stuff that sucks, so that when you pick up an NCO rank, like you know how to lead Marines. So I was totally fine doing that. But again, to be into an organization for 5 years and not selfishly, but like for the betterment of the organization, proposing ways to make things better, and having that immediately shut down, because to your point, you just have to execute. Don't think, don't color outside the lines.
The font's going to be Area 12, whether you like it or not. Don't even try bringing Calibre into this conversation.
No chance. Yeah. And so that's when I just knew. Then this is like the foray into like entrepreneurship and venture capital is just like I love big thinkers. I love folks who kind of, think differently than others and are, I think you, in this world, again, in America, you're kind of rewarded for that. To look at all the greatest companies, they've all gone against the grain in one fashion or another. That's the definition of like a startup exists, right? Is because it's creating something that's better, faster, cheaper, more efficient.
Yeah.
So like I went from an environment where that's not rewarded to now I'm surrounded only by folks that are always thinking of how do we make something better, faster, cheaper, more efficient.
So you knew you wanted to get out, because of those inefficiencies or the inability to kind of enact change, right? But there's a big gap between kind of knowing the direction that you want to go, or more specifically, it seemed like you knew what you didn't want, but did you know what you actually wanted? And then how do you cross that chasm of, okay, I'm not liking this, but then I have the entire rest of the world, right? The left and right bounds of that is incredibly big. So how were you trying to navigate that when, let's be honest, at least when I got out 2015, when you were getting out back then, not too many resources for the enlisted to navigate the transition.
I think this is where I got lucky. It was certainly at the time much more, I knew what I didn't want than what I did want. It's not like I'm getting out of the Marines. This is 2008, right? So I'm 23 years old. It's not like I knew, okay, I want to get into entrepreneurship. I just knew, again, the next path for me was I went into the Marines, let me use the GI Bill and get my education, because that just starts to open up so many more doors. And this is where I got very lucky because, again, based on how I performed in the Marines and the promotions and all of that, I had a really great record. And when my sergeant major finally, like I had a personal relationship with the sergeant major and the CO, which is like very rare for a sergeant to have.
Right.
But they knew who I was. And when they, realize, hey, he's not staying in the Marines, they decided, let's try to make this transition like he's going to be kind of a poster boy for us. Mm-hmm. And they had just come out with this new model of transitioning service members straight into 4-year universities.
Wow.
And again, most go through kind of the community college route. They're trying to like kind of flounder a little bit, trying to figure it out. And I probably would have been in that camp trying to figure out like, well, what's next? Because honestly, TAPS and the transition was not great at the time. I've heard it's improved a little bit.
We had a current University of Phoenix professor, teaching our class.
Yeah.
Which, just for libel reasons, or not actually, but maybe bleep the name and then we'll keep going. But right, the idea that you could go to a good school was unfathomable. Yeah, that word. I mean, people didn't know, right? And so when I was getting out on TAPS, it was just like, I guess University of Phoenix or some other for-profit school.
Yeah, and I think that's, at the time, that's what most Marines were thinking, certainly on the enlisted side. But because I was in Camp Pendleton, which is in San Diego, they had just created this partnership. I remember with Cal State Fullerton, Cal State San Marcos, and San Diego State University. Wow. And I remember I had heard of San Diego State, and again, it wasn't this like prestigious school that like my sisters went to, Stanford or even my brother in Berkeley and everything. But I remember like thinking I really want to stay in San Diego, and I've heard this is a good school. Mm-hmm. And so I don't remember the name of the program, but I was literally the first. I don't know if it exists anymore. I was the very first one. I was the guinea pig through it. I remember my sergeant major kind of pulling me aside. I was like, "Don't mess this up," and she knew that I wouldn't. But I got out just as quickly as I graduated high school and started the Marines. I got out of the Marines, July 2008. And 1 month later, August, I'm starting at a 4-year university at San Diego State with I had done a bunch of MCIs. I don't know if those things still exist. They're like the red books that are continuing education credits. Yeah. So I ended up transferring in. Yeah, I don't know if there's a new name for them since then.
They always change up their acronyms.
So many acronyms. Yeah. But I end up transferring in, and I start as a sophomore, with sophomore level credits at San Diego State University. And what a gift and what a blessing to not have to deal with, all the craziness and trying to figure it out.
Maybe it's just me. I feel like there's some sort of ironic twist to that in the sense of you left the military for the inability to kind of, do moving and shaking. And there's probably some officer who started that program and got a promotion being like,
yeah,
Mike didn't up, and being the one who got to pioneer it as the individual, because there had to have been some officer who was like, I've got an idea and enacted, and then you be the first one. And ironically, you're leaving because like on the enlisted side or for you weren't able to, see that or be able to do that similar kind of thing.
That is interesting. So it's funny if someone is like watching or listening to this and they or that officer that came up with that program. Thank you for, and I
reach
did,
us at ITF at vetrify.com.
No, and I did, it's so interesting because I ended up graduating. I would take 23 units a semester. I was like, I was there to learn. Yeah. Right. It's such a different mindset to go to college as a 23-year-old coming out of the Marines than an 18-year-old that's just trying to figure it out. I was the one that sat in the front row. I knew all my teachers. I'd go, office hours with them. I ended up, I think, getting 1B my entire 3 years there.
Which class?
I don't even remember, but I just remember like I was so mad about the B because I ended up, it was like a 3.96 or something that I graduated with.
Yeah.
I'm like, I almost, there's just this part of me that is like forever super competitive. But yeah, I certainly, whoever created that program, I think I made them proud, and I showed them, I think, what Marines, enlisted Marines are capable of.
It's so funny. I mean, that motivation, I had almost failed out of high school. And so when I was in community college, similar thing where I had one class, I think it was college level algebra. It took me three tries to pass the placement test to just get into algebra. And I remember the professor, if you were taking a test and you got some questions wrong, you could redo it and you would get half points. So even if I got a 96, I would do it just so I could get a 98.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, it's still an A regardless. I'm like, no, like I got something wrong. I want to be able to learn from my mistakes. And like, I don't care if it's an A or an A. I want a 98, not a 96.
Yeah.
And I think that mentality, I mean, is good, right? Like what is, and this is I'm going to confound this way higher. Going back to America, right? Like America is built on like not perfection, but a lot of ideology that is really hard to reach. And I think in the same right, like in your professional career, whatever you're doing, like, again, what's the difference between a 96 and a 98? It's the fact that I got something wrong and I can learn from this, right? And there's no such thing as perfection. You're always going to make a mistake. But if you at least set that as a goal, even if you're a peg below it, right, you're at least striving for it. Which I think is important.
And to me, like the only area where I'd like push back slightly is where like, I think it's less about the score of the 96 and 98, but it's more about you as the human. You're like, no, I want to learn. I was the same way. Like I wanted to get 100% on all tests. And if I got something wrong, I would focus on that question that I got wrong. And some people will maybe call that a negative quality. I love it. I'm like, no, I want to learn.
Yeah.
And I think, you were saying America in certain industries, whatever, it's hard to reach. Like, yeah, it should be hard to reach, but it's not unattainable. Yeah. Like, again, to come back to how this conversation started, we're so blessed because all of the resources available to us, instead of watching like some stupid TikTok dance video, you can, like, Khan Academy is available for you. All of the MIT and Stanford and Harvard lectures are free and publicly available. You have everything, every book, every podcast, like everything is at your fingertips if you want it bad enough.
Yeah.
And so I think like even if someone isn't naturally skilled or naturally, they don't identify as like, I'm super smart or I learn things quickly, like it is all available for you. It depends on how bad you want it. I've always heard like when your why becomes big enough, you figure out your how. Yeah. And I think like it's just important to have a deep why.
So it seemed on the academic side, you were clearly motivated. What was the biggest shock to your system, though? Because it is, a culture shock. It is a complete change of pace going from, day in, day out, being in the Marines, waking up at 5:30 for PT and having the NCO Corps and the officer corps to being like Mike the free man in university. Technically, you could do whatever. You can show up to class. You don't have to. You had the motivation. But then how are you balancing all the other stuff going on in the world? And now, obviously, once a Marine, always a Marine, but being also Mike the student.
Yeah, interestingly, when I look back, I see this common thread of everything I've done. of community. I think community, camaraderie is the answer to that question. What I mean is, got very lucky my first semester. By the way, at San Diego State, you're allowed to take different aquatic sports for credits. It's so awesome.
Just aquatic.
Well, they have a bunch of other ones, but the ones that I was interested in, because I grew up going to the Delta and wakeboarding. So you could do wakeboarding, you could do surfing, you could do sailing, and I love wakeboarding. So I ended up, and it's only one credit, but they have beginner, intermediate, advanced, second advanced, and they set this up this way so you can take a different class every semester and keep getting credit for it. So I did wakeboarding every single semester.
That's awesome.
That I was in college. And the very first semester I'm taking this wakeboarding class, I meet this awesome guy in my class, Ryan Rimo. And he's telling me about a fraternity that he's in. And I had already written that off in my mind. I'm like, no, I'm 23 years old.
Yeah.
I'm out of the Marines. There's no way I'm going into a fraternity and getting hazed by a bunch of, 18-year-old kids. And I developed this friendship with Ryan. I started to meet some of the other brothers, and I realized, like, wow, these are great humans.
Yeah.
And we have a lot in common. It's this whole idea of being like a scholar athlete. Yeah. And I definitely identified with, like, yeah, I'm there to learn, but I'm also like, I grew up being an athlete. And so I found camaraderie and I found brotherhood through this Sigma Phi Epsilon. It's an incredible organization. And it really, like, if it wasn't for SIGEP for short, I'm so grateful for it, because it was this incredible social experience. I got to have the full college experience of, like, look, have the fun parties and all that, because it's San Diego State and you're supposed to have fun when you're there. But also, like, we're all there to get an education, get good grades. So we would do these, like, study groups, and we would have, like, we pushed each other. And I don't know, I would have figured it out by myself probably, but it's always helpful when you have other people that are on a similar path. So I found a community of people that also were there. Look, let's balance having fun, but getting everything we need to get done.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, getting good grades, getting an education, that is why you're in college, right? But at the same time, it's also networking, making friends, figuring out what you want to do in life. And to be fair, so I joined K-SIG, shout out K-SIG.
There we go.
I wasn't the best, but you get to meet people who have done well kind of their entire life. I joined, talking about sports, the polo club, not water polo, literally horse polo.
On a horse.
On a horse.
I need to see evidence of this. Did you wear the hat?
Got the helmets. Yeah.
Okay.
You needed to wear a helmet. I did fall a few times. So I maybe rode a horse once before in my life. And I just thought it would be really funny getting accepted into Stanford. And I was like, what was the most, like, bourgeois or, like, bougie kind of sport I could play? I'm like, horse polo.
Stanford. Yeah.
Yep. But then you get to meet people who have done really well. And then their parents have been in VC or in investment banking, and you get to learn from them. So yeah, you get to learn in the classroom at university, but then you also get to meet really cool individuals who can help you out in the future. And that makes it sound really transactional. They are my friends too. I'm not saying I made friends just for the pure transaction of it, but it is a secondary benefit of, I get to meet really cool individuals who have had a different experience in their life. I came from the military. They come from, a 4.0 at a private university and are doing a internship at Lightspeed. That's super cool. And then they go, hey, actually, I heard that there's a position open at this. You should definitely apply, or I can make an introduction for you. And that's such a big benefit. And I think a lot of veterans, or some veterans, forget that second half of the college experience.
Yeah, I think it's, affiliations with the professional organizations are super important. It's essentially like, why do people go, why did they think there's incredible value in, like, GSB or HBS? Yeah. It's really the network. It's being an alumni of these incredible programs that helps just open doors. And it's not like you're doing it because you want something immediately, but it's like, it helps you stand out. And so whether it's nice that I have these different affiliations now of being a Marine. So now when I connect with someone else, like, oh, you were in the Marines, or, oh, I went to San Diego State. Oh, you're an Aztec. Yeah. Okay. Oh, you were in SIGEP. Oh, hey, let's give the secret handshake. You're part of these different organizations. Oh, you're an exited founder. Okay. You get what it's like being a founder. Now you're a VC. There's like certain groups that I think are important to identify like which ones you want to be part of, because they help separate you from it's signal from noise. They separate you from.
It also just makes you a more well-rounded person.
Yeah, I think
it
so.
makes you a more well-rounded person. And then, to your point, right? There's, people who reach out and they go, do you think I can get into this school because I'm a veteran? I'm like, well, is that the only reason? Because at the end of the day, there's also 100 other veterans probably applying for the same position. So that in itself isn't going to make you the differentiator. Like, what else is there beyond that one facet of your life?
Yeah.
So you're in college, you touch on a few of these industries. How are you figuring out what you want to do? Is that through internships, or walk me through what's going through Mike, the college student, and figuring out like, what do I want to do now the rest of my life, or just once I graduate?
Yeah. I feel grateful that, the first 2 years I was in, I didn't really have to think about that.
Yeah.
I just knew, I call this kind of just in time learning, like what is immediately in front of me, right? Like when I was getting out of the Marines, I knew, okay, bachelor's degree, that's just the next step. I wasn't even looking at job opportunities because, okay, that's what's immediately in front of me. So, first year, second year at San Diego State, it's obvious exactly what's in front of me. It's do well in school. That's just...
Sorry, what?
At San Diego State, first 2 years, like immediately in front of me is just do well in school.
Oh, do well in school. I thought you said something like do want school. I was like,
oh, no.
Is that an acronym? Do well in school.
Do well. That's all that's in front of me. And now, third year, I'm about to graduate. Now I'm starting to think, okay, well, what does a career look like? And I did my bachelor's in kinesiology because it's kind of what I knew, right? As a martial arts instructor and also the continuing education, the way it worked out, it was easiest for me to pursue kinesiology with an emphasis in fitness, nutrition, and health. These are just things I was like, well, I'm kind of naturally interested in this anyway.
Yeah.
And so, I started, in my final year exploring what are different career paths, what are things I can do with a degree in kinesiology. And it was, well, like you can be, a personal trainer, and you can do, you could go the PT route or the athletic training route, or, there are all these different pathways, but ultimately I kind of saw them, as limiting. And in some ways, just like in the Marines, like it didn't provide the opportunity for me to be creative within an organization. So I realized, well, I guess entrepreneurship.
Right.
I'm going to figure this thing out. And so I just started Googling and researching like, well, how do you start a business in the health and wellness space? And at the time, and this is a company that I later sold, they had a franchise model of, if anyone's heard of Fit Body Bootcamp. And now it's a very different model. At the time, they sent you like a DVD, 10-pack DVD set that was like, follow these instructions one by one to like open up your own, Fit Body like location.
Right.
You didn't have to use their name at the time. So I had branded as something different. And I just kind of followed it step by step. And again, it was this whole idea of when your why becomes big enough, you figure out your how. My why was huge, right? It's like I'm getting out of school. And I forgot to mention, like at 20 years old, I have my son.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I have a 19-year-old now. And here's the full circle story, by the way. He is at San Diego State now and a sophomore, and he's in Sigma Phi Epsilon.
That's awesome.
So I had this like crazy full circle moment a year ago where I went to the fraternity house. He ended up winning some award there, and I go upstairs in the house.
Wall?
I am on the wall. Like the composite of our years are on the wall. And I'm like, this is the main hallway that my son walks down every day. And like,
you
Dad's
didn't tell
on the
him
wall.
I puked in that corner. I maybe drank a little too much.
I just told him
one.
we've had some fun stories in this house for sure. But it's an important part of the story because again, I'm graduating and I want to stay in San Diego. I need to provide for my son and his mother, myself to be living in San Diego, and a regular, 9-to-5 job with like, it just wasn't going to cut it.
Yeah.
That wasn't going to be enough.
It's so interesting. I mean, because we've talked about this too, and everyone has their kind of own unique things, right? When they're going in, how are you balancing that? Because I mean, it's so funny because you say I needed to, be able to provide to them, right? But entrepreneurship is probably like the most risky and dangerous thing. And so, at least in my mind, I would go, I need that 9 to 5 because it's secure. Like I need to find a corporate job, something that is going to pay the bills, on the 1st and the 15th. How are you? Because you say the why is big enough, but were you thinking at all like maybe I should go back in the Marines, or I need something more stable, or was it just, hey, sink or swim? I got to figure this out.
It was a little bit of both. So it was like I had 1 foot in, 1 foot out in the transition. What I mean by that is I ended up getting what was a relatively flexible job I looked up, okay, personal training. That's easy to do. It's flexible, and I can kind of decide what schedule I want to create there. So I looked at, okay, where are like the highest paying gyms in San Diego? And this was before we had an Equinox. We had this place called, it's still there, Bay Club in Carmel Valley. It's like the wealthiest part of all of California. And I remember, it was like $125 an hour. Not that the club would get.
You're not getting. Do you remember how much?
I want to say it started at like 40%.
Oh, man. Okay.
And then it would move up to like 50%, which is still good.
I thought you were going to say $40, and I'm like, wow, they're making out like bandits there.
It's
40%. Oh man, 40%.
So but look, to be getting like $50 an hour at the time, to be doing actually what I really enjoy doing as a little bit of the safety net and cushion. Yeah. And I would kind of throttle it up or down depending on like what I needed at the time. And so I'm grateful for that opportunity. I can't say I like dove in head first, but I was certainly, Gary Vaynerchuk says it's like, it's not what you're doing in your 9 to 5, it's what you're doing in the 5 to 9.
Yeah.
And so for me, so much of entrepreneurship was what I was doing in the 5 to 9 after I knew I had what I needed to kind of make it work.
Yep.
And then there's, again, this deep why in like growing the actual entrepreneur business.
I've got more questions, but I'm not going to let you get away with not having a little bit of the entree. So let's crack these open.
All right. I will say again, if I left right now, I would give a 10 out of 10 review for MREs just based on that jerky. So I hope this doesn't bring the rating down.
Honestly, it's
Italian sausage with peppers and onions. All right.
The jerky alone would have me.
Let me have a little more of that. That's good. I'm gonna take this home.
Oh man, this one's not gonna be good. But so as we open these up, I'm trying to open this without making an entire mess.
Yeah, when did they change it? It now opens horizontally.
I don't know when they changed
hot dog versus hamburger.
This packet is inspected for 2024, but I think created 2022.
Okay.
So, two going on 3 years. These are relatively, they're fresh when the M&Ms
are still a little crunchy.
The basically the commercial stuff that comes with it is still fresh.
The smell actually brings back memories.
Good memories or bad memories?
No, just like MRE memories.
MRE memories. We'll take it. Yeah. So I'm going to try with this one to get the barbecue sauce in. And again, not trying to make a mess at the same time. No, that's cheese. This actually could be pretty good. Cheese spread, mayo, and barbecue sauce. You could basically just sauce this thing to death and it will be good. But if we can multitask here.
Yeah.
So you're starting a gym.
I'm going in.
Yeah. Let's actually get the 1 bite score. Did I overhype it? Overrated, underrated?
Let's put it this way. I'm taking a second bite.
You know what? We'll take it. 1 out of 10.
It would be better heated up.
Yeah.
I mentioned before we started, haven't really eaten today. So hunger levels are high. So this is probably an inflated score, but I give it a 7.
I think that,
Yeah.
that's a very fair score.
A hungry 7.
Yeah. And to be fair, when you're in the military and you're eating an MRE,
Yeah.
more often than not, you're just going to be really, really hungry. So I would say that's a very accurate score.
Yeah, you just want something either sweet, salty. You want food.
Exactly. So jumping back, college or university does a good job at teaching you classroom skills, but not necessarily entrepreneurial skills. How are you figuring this out? Is it just really you're following it book by book?
Yeah, and I'm grateful for that opportunity. Again, having the outline of like follow this step by step. I kind of want to see your reaction. Which one you went with?
This is beef patty, and ooh, it's like spicy.
What do you rate it?
Hold on, I gotta go one more.
One bite. Everyone knows the rules.
Everyone knows the rules. This was better than the maple patty because there's a little bit of spice in there.
Yeah.
And with the barbecue sauce, I'd put this at a 6.5.
Not bad. Are you
Like
are you hungry?
I am a bit hungry.
Okay.
I'm a bit hungry. But of all the patty shaped MREs, this is probably the best of the patties.
There you go.
And the barbecue sauce is doing a lot of the lifting, I think. But
Yeah.
I took some bites. If you want to have a bite, feel free. We can flip it over if you're curious. But also, don't know if you want to ruin your dinner later.
I'll hold on to mine. I do.
Yeah,
It's not bad.
they're not bad at all.
Yeah.
And I think the people who have gotten out a while ago, it's been a couple generations of MRE improvements, have consistently gone, this is way better than when I was in.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just not sure if it's the nostalgia, but I do think to some extent they just improved it.
I think you scared me a little bit.
I get you prepared for the worst.
Yeah.
So when you actually have it.
Yeah, you set expectations quite low. Also, I don't know if they'd like do a great job at, making them look entirely appetizing. So I will say pleasantly surprised. I mean, I do give that beef jerky and mix. I give that a 9 out of 10.
That
again,
alone,
I would buy that. I would pay for that in a store.
Yeah.
This, if I'm very hungry. So look, between a 7 and a 9, we're solid 8 out of 10.
We'll take it. And if you're in the field and you need, not that I ever smoke, but if you need a pack of cigarettes, that's getting you at least a few cigarettes out of the pack.
Yeah.
Not that I condone smoking, but going back. So then you're working on the gym. Get me from there to where you are now, because that's leaps and bounds, right? So what chasms are you crossing in order to get to where you are today?
Yeah, I think this is the perfect time to say, like, it takes 10 years to create an overnight success, right? So in like my bios or when people meet me, they go, oh, okay, exited founder, VC. What they're really saying is like, what they're missing is, 10 years. Because now, again, you do the math. I graduate the Marines when I'm 23 years old. I do 3 years of school, so now I'm 26 years old. Mm-hmm. And I'm 39 now. So really, like and I start the firm 3 years ago, the Veteran Fund. And so that is exactly 10 years from when I'm starting my very first entrepreneurial venture to being able to be in a position. And it was a few years before that where I'm able to start angel investing before I start the VC firm. But it's 10 years. It's 10 years.
And it was always peachy. Zero
challenges.
Pain, no challenges.
Sailing the entire time. Nothing ever went wrong. Nothing to stress about ever. No, it's like just nonstop learning and figuring things out, and highs and celebrating wins, and like just getting hit in the face and like just figuring it out. And so like, I don't know which specific moment to focus on, but what I will say is like with each one and with each passing year, there's just like, I certainly developed more confidence in myself as a founder. And as an investor, I wanted to make sure I was good at putting my own capital to work before I ever took anyone else's, because that's what VC is. You as general partners, GPs of a fund, we take LP capital. So we take other people's money and we're investing it on their behalf as fiduciaries. I obviously wanted to make sure I was good at that before I ever took anyone else's. And so the very quick, the wave tops of it is, I end up starting and scaling the fitness company is called HMS Fitness to several locations and selling it to the first person that I ever hired. And these aren't the life-changing technology outcomes, but it's certainly the sale of that business was the first meaningful time I was whoa, I've got a little bit of freedom and wow, I have means.
Yeah.
Because I would say up until then, right, the Marines were peanuts. In college, peanuts.
Yep.
I'm not working. I'm getting GI Bill. And so, and with my business, essentially every bit of capital that came in, I was reinvesting back in the company to scale and open up more locations. So I have this freedom.
Yeah.
And I end up randomly, super random, doing yoga teacher training. I was just thinking about what do I love?
Yeah.
I fell in love with yoga. And I do yoga teacher training and I realize the entrepreneur mind is now kicked on and I go, hey, I think I get this business thing. Yeah. And I see that the yoga studio where I was going called Core Power Yoga was selling towels. They only had 2 brands, Manduka and Yogi Toes at the time. I was and they were $65, $70. I'm wait, when you do hot yoga, it's the towel you put over your mouth. So I was well, let me look into this. Started working with a bunch of manufacturers overseas, ended up creating a social impact venture called Karuna Towels.
Yeah.
Ended up selling that company.
Wow.
And so this was my first social venture. And then I joined a venture-backed startup called Wildfire, and then ultimately helped a nutraceutical company go public. And so I'm essentially taking lessons that I've learned from each previous venture and stacking them into the next thing, stacking them into the next I'm in no way implying I'm anything like Elon, but he's top of mind for me.
Are.
Although, I'm not the podcast host closest to Joe Rogan, the gentleman sitting across from me. I'm just saying, some people, have said.
I mean, Holden is probably the closest to Joe Rogan, but...
Oh, there you go. I say that all the time, actually. Clip that right there. Clip that. Yeah.
Put it right in the front of this episode. No, so it's funny. He's top of mind because I was listening to a podcast about him yesterday, and that when he sold his first company, this is before PayPal, he kind of rolled everything into PayPal, and then he chose out of this $170 million that he received from the PayPal exit, he invested $100 million into SpaceX, $50 million into Tesla, $10 million into
Boring Company,
maybe Boring or Starlink, something like that. So essentially everything that he got, he just reinvested right back into it. And it's part of his master plan of stacking everything he had done previously into the next venture. And again, I'm not anywhere near those amounts of capital, but I certainly felt like I was skill stacking. Everything I learned, boom, next thing.
Yeah.
Take that, next thing.
Well, I think you hit on such a good point in the sense of startups, regardless if you're a first-time founder or 10th-time founder, you're going to hit into challenges. Personally as a second time founder, I'm still getting punched in the face, but when you do it more often and as you get more experience, you just either learn how to handle those punches to the face or B, avoid the more common pitfalls, because when you first get started, you're figuring out HR, payroll, everything. Right. And so then when you become a second or third or fourth founder, you start going, well, I figured out this problem before, so I already know how to tackle it. And I figured out this. So then you get to hone more and more on what does the operations of this company look like, or how do we scale in a more efficient way? Or you kind of get to spend more of your energy, I think, on the growth of the company rather than just figuring out how to do A or B.
Yeah, and what you're essentially leading to is actually our entire mandate and investment thesis at the Veteran Fund, which is if I'm going to bet on an archetype of founder, a type of founder who is going to figure it out, whether first time, second time, third time, who has incredible leadership skills, incredible resilience, a deep sense of purpose, who better than a military veteran? Someone that's raised their right hand, that has gone through what many regard as the greatest leadership academy in the world, the United States military, regardless of service. If you spent time in the military, you have those skills of leadership, resilience, and purpose, which translate incredibly well to business. It's this the type of founder I was. I'm going to figure it out. you're going to figure it out. Like there's, the Marines, we say adapt and overcome. You're going to find a way through. Like you're going to have a bunch of challenges, but if you're used to these high stress situations and being able to just navigate it calmly, tactfully, mindfully, like what better type of founder to bet on, especially at the earliest stages of companies. It's not that there aren't knowledge gaps. I do think it's important to like fill those gaps and, skill gaps and fill those in too. But again, like there are these like intangible character qualities that, that you essentially alluded to, which I think most, if not all military veterans have, which is our entire thesis at the Veteran Fund.
I mean, in the military, it's shoot, move, communicate. Just get rid of the shoot part and, replace that with something else. And that's startups, right? And you just translate those skills. And then the stuff that you don't know, right? You kind of learn along the way. I would love to get into how you started the Veteran Fund. You alluded to it a bit, but then how do you, because it is a shift, going from the operator role to the investor role. And you mentioned you had done some investing yourself. But then what ultimately led to you figuring out the thesis for the Veteran Fund, but then also making that leap into getting LPs? Because I think maybe people know this, maybe people don't. For a long time when I was a startup founder, my perception is always like, I'm just trying to get money from VCs, right? Mm-hmm. And man, it would be so great to be a VC because you just have this money and you just invest in startups. But the reality is, VCs are going to LPs and they're trying to raise money. And
VCs are founders.
Yeah. And some of those LPs are trying to raise money. It's just, everyone's just trying to look for money. So how did that flip?
Yeah, I think, first of all, that the industry is over glamorized. So is like oftentimes being a startup founder. Everyone loves the idea of being a startup founder, but they're really saying like, I want the outcome of being a successful startup founder. I
want the 10-year mark.
Yeah, exactly. Skip from today to 10 years from now. VC is very much the same way. Again, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but it's been a very, gated industry for a long time. Like you were either kind of in or out, and the folks that were in were very selective on who else was allowed to be in. And that's a function of where LPs are allocating capital. LPs are limited partners of funds. They're the folks that are, putting money into the VC firm or fund. And for a long time, they would just have, certain managers or certain firms that they would invest in, and that was it. And so we're also, very lucky to be alive at a time where there is more LP capital available. And instead of just the institutionals, the endowments and the pension funds that would only allocate to certain firms, now you have, a growing number of family offices, and they're choosing where to place their kind of capital, and they have a certain percentage of their portfolio into early stage funds like ours. And then you now have funds of funds, and you have now ultra high net worth and high net worth individuals that are choosing to allocate into not just this asset class, but specifically there's this whole like emerging manager movement. But the transition was, I knew I loved investing, and I still it's what I think about. It's what I read about. It's what I talk about. It's what I read, like everything. There's something about investing that I just personally, Mike Sherbakov, am incredibly drawn to. It's hard to describe other than, man, this is what I'm here to do.
Right.
And so I remember getting like my first taste of it and writing my first angel investment check, which was super scary. But I'm like, whoa, I actually really like this process of like sourcing companies. Where do you find great companies? Diligencing. How do you identify whether it's a good investment or not? And looking under the hood and what makes a good startup or not. Helping them right along the way. And then like hopefully getting them to some kind of liquidity event in the form of M&A or IPO or whatever that is. And so that was just naturally very interesting to me. And now I now had the experience as a founder to be able to go do this. So initially I thought I was going to go start be a solo GP in a fund. And I was running, which I still run, the veteran vertical of the world's largest startup accelerator. It's called Founder Institute. Yep. So my business partner, Ryan McLeody, and I run that. So we had this working relationship, and I told him, he knew I was going through this program called VC Lab. In starting, I was like, I'm going to start a solo fund. And he reached out to me when I was about halfway through the program, and he says, hey, a buddy of mine, Air Force veteran, just had an exit. He sold, and this is Mike Frazier, he had sold his company, not huge in tech, but he sold his company for $55 million. And he personally walked away with $35 million. And what Mike did is Mike Frazier calls Ryan and says, hey, I've just had this big exit. I want to invest, into great companies. So Ryan, actually, I have to give him credit, was the one that pitched this idea to me. He says, Mike, I know that you are starting your own fund. What do you think about a fund focused on veteran founders? And it was like, aha, light bulb moment. Boom, let's go. And we had already had a great friendship. We had already been working together many years. And so I said, yes, I just need to loop in one person. And that's my buddy and best friend, other partner, GP at the fund, Justin Nahama. And so 3 of us came together. It's a fun story that we'll talk about later about how we brought Lisa into the picture. She was actually our first LP, and then, specifically said, I want to be part of the team. And it was the best decision we ever made, bringing her on. But it really, I think, it was a combination of stacking a bunch of skills that we had and just the kind of the right timing.
Right.
The last piece I'll say, I know we're kind of running towards the
I
end
love
too.
this. Yeah.
Is like, there's, I think this speaks to, and I appreciate you asking these questions all the way from like childhood through high school and college and entrepreneurship and now VC. Like the common theme is not necessarily knowing what life will look like 5 or 10 years from now, but knowing in this moment, what is the thing that I'm feeling drawn to?
Yeah.
And I'm just I think this is an important thing. I've given talks about this many times. Like, I think for anyone that's ever struggling with like, what's my purpose or what am I here to do? And I think a lot of folks, getting out of the military ask themselves that question, or that are in times of transition. I think it's a very simple like answer. And that is like, what are you curious about?
Yeah.
What do you find yourself, again, what do you like reading? What do you like doing? What do you like thinking about? What do you like talking about? What do you like listening to? And like find a way to incorporate more of that in your life.
Yeah.
So I talked about like the gym. Like in college, what did I study? I studied kinesiology because it was what I was interested in.
Yep.
So every step I just kind of kept following with a deep sense of passion, what I was interested in. And naturally, I don't know if you found this to be true, you find other people that are passionate about those things. And now you're surrounded with other interesting people who love the same things you do.
Exactly. There's so many people who I talk to who try to pigeonhole themselves into kind of a quote unquote proven set of success, right? With whatever they're doing. And the idea is there's 1.5 million ways you can be successful, right? Now, can you take inspiration from others? Can you learn from others? 100%. But this idea that there's one track to find success, or, again, and I mentioned this a whole bunch on the podcast, is I thought in order to be successful out of the military, I had to go the investment banking route. Like I thought that is the only way to make money. That's the only way that I perceived success. Not knowing that there's entrepreneurship, there's startups, there's technology, there's so many other ways that you could do it. And there's other proven people that have done it this way. But this idea that I need to follow this path rather than going this way, I think is a trap that sometimes people fall into, or at least I've gone through, and then find the inspiration and get the group around you, right? Like I have an incredible group of fintech friends now in New York where we grab dinner or go to events with each other and what have you, and build that tribe, wherever you're at. So you have your military tribe, you have your startup tribe, you have your college tribe, and all of those can coalesce and just make you that better person.
And you wouldn't have these group of fintech friends if you hadn't started a fintech company. Yep. And so it's funny, for whatever reason, as you're saying this, it reminded me before we started rolling, you were talking about like this game. Remind me of the game you play.
Oh, World of Warcraft or Ultima Online?
Yeah, so those
yeah.
types of games. I haven't played, maybe for 5 minutes I played, but what I remember is whatever game that was, like everything is dark. Mm-hmm. And when you walk to a certain area, that area around it lights up.
Could be Diablo. That's been,
yeah, something like that. Or maybe it was like spacecraft, like back in the day. Yeah. But I just remember so you don't know what you don't know. Like there's just this like blackness around that you don't see what's even out there. Mm-hmm. But as soon as you move in that direction, now all of a sudden that like 10-foot radius around you is illuminated and you go, whoa, I didn't even know this thing was here. And I think like all you have to be concerned with, in my opinion, just like you said with your fintech friends, is like, what is that next thing? What's the next movement you're going to make that then illuminates that 10-foot radius around you? Never would I have believed when I'm sitting in front of that recruiter at 18 years old and he's putting out the placards in front of me and I'm picking the words and saying, I care about all. Would I have said 20 years later, hey, Mike, you'd be running a successful VC firm as a general partner with 18 incredible companies, to include companies like yours. And you would be, investing in great veteran lead. That would have been crazy to me, because think of how many steps that took, how many times I had to take the step to eliminate another 10-foot radius, another 10-foot radius, another. And again, who knows where it'll be 10 years from now. But I think that's like the exciting part, is without getting stuck, like what is the next step you can take that illuminates that next radius around you?
I've got two questions and I'm going to kind of combine them a bit. And not to put a negative twist on this, but we talk a lot about the positive aspects of the military, right? I mean, the Veteran Fund specifically invest in veteran founders, right? Because of the good skills that you learn. Is there any skills that you think get taught or ingrained in the military that you think veterans should break? And another way, or to tag onto that last part of the question, is, what advice do you have for people thinking about leaving the military?
I think it comes down to, personality and who someone is. I think if people can thrive in any environment, just like I think it's a similar question you can ask yourself when you get out of the military as well. Do I go, enter the workforce as an employee, or do I go work for myself? Do I do the entrepreneurship thing? I think that's a personal choice for everyone. In the military, and again, I can't speak to the officer ranks because I was only enlisted, but the downside could be that you are not, in an environment, the soil is not fertile for you to be creative and to be innovative, and it certainly does not foster an environment that allows you to think outside the box. It's very much like you said, it's execute. In fact, like, here's the box and here's exactly how to do it. Just follow these instructions. And the better you do that, the more that you'll be rewarded for it. And I was, again, the reason I got these promotions is because I was really good at doing what I was told. Right. And I would just do that to nth degree and level of perfection. Right. But I think people just have to decide for themselves, like, do you like being in that environment? Or would you rather be in an environment where you do have more of that freedom? And I know a lot of folks that have tried the entrepreneurship thing, and it's really just not for them. Yeah. Like it's like analysis paralysis.
And that's
so
okay.
Many options.
And just so for anyone watching, like, that's also okay. Like, it's fine to try something and be like, nope, not for me, and try something else.
We need it all. Imagine right now if we only lived in a world of entrepreneurs, and like every single person could, like, you would never be able to hire anyone. I would never be able to hire anyone. Like, companies just wouldn't be able to grow because every single person says, no, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm going to do my own thing. Similarly, if you didn't have the entrepreneurs or the innovator, like the CEOs, like you need everyone. But I think it's important to just be honest with yourself about, like, where do I feel like it's the best use of kind of my time, my energy, my thoughts.
Absolutely. Mike, a million more questions I could ask you. We got to wrap it up though. Thank you so much for being on the show. We'll have to have you on again. Enjoy the rest of your time in New York. Safe travels back to San Diego. Yeah. I guess final thing, any shout outs, any Instagram handles you want to call out, or we can post it all up here if you want.
I would just say, we're depending on when this is being released, for the next 6 months, we're grateful to say we had an initial target for our fund. We ended up oversubscribing at double the target. Congrats. Which is, thank you. Just very, very grateful for that. But we're in this heavy deployment cycle. Right. Meaning we have 18 companies. We're looking for 8 more. So if anyone is a veteran on the leadership team of a great startup, just go to our website, veteran.fund, or just fill out our intake form. We look at a lot of great companies, and we really invest in the best. So looking for great companies.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks so much, Holden. Appreciate you.